Hey guys, I thought I'd make a little video and post it so we can just make sure we're all on the same page with working on stroke, just our approach to the drum, so that at our next camp in January, we're all on the same page with all that, making sure that we're all working on the same stuff in the same way so that we're ready to go once we get to camp. The first thing we're going to talk about is the grip on the mallet. If you can look over here, I'm going to turn this over and open up. There's a red line. That red line on my hand is basically where the mallet should lay in the hand. It's going from here, maybe a ½ inch under the pinky, upwards and over the first joint in the pointer finger, just like that. I'm going to set the mallet on there. Remember, in bass drum grip, there really shouldn't be any mallet coming out past the hand like that. It's going to be right flush with the palm. And this red line here is going to be where I'm going to set that mallet. Close the fingers around. So before we start talking about playing on a bass drum surface, which is vertical, let's make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to playing on a horizontal surface. First of all, I want to isolate the wrist stroke and make sure that I've got that. Holding the grip with what we were talking about before, I'm just going to check some rebounding strokes. You can see that all the motion starts in the bead. I'm not leading with the wrist or doing anything weird like that, leading with the elbow or the shoulder. Nothing like that going on. All in the bead of the mallet, right? That's where the motion begins and that's where it ends. Rebounding right up to where the stroke started from. Now, when we get into playing some repeated strokes, what's going to start to happen is just naturally, I don't want you to really think about trying to make this happen, the forearm's just going to relax. Because we are relaxed from the shoulder and neck down, there should be a little bit of, let's call it a bounce in the forearm. And you can see that start to happen. Remember, in going for being totally relaxed, we're not going to try to lock up any parts of our body. We're not going to say, I shouldn't allow the elbow to move, or I should keep this still, or anything like that. Do what feels natural. Don't feel like you need to lock anything up, and that's how we're going to get on the same page. So, rebounding, isolating the wrist, 90% of our motion is coming from the wrist. Loose fingers make the rebound possible, and then adding just a little bit of bounce to the forearm, we're going to get a good, strong, velocity stroke. Before we get more into how this stroke works exactly, I just want to say that your hand should be relaxed all the time. There should be this little bit of wiggle room. You should never be, you should never have a white knuckle grip on the mallet or anything like that. Make sure that it's nice and relaxed, not loose to the point where you're bailing out back fingers, but nice and relaxed so that we get a good resonant sound out of the mallet and the drum. So the theory is we shouldn't have to change a whole lot going from this surface to this surface. I'm going to generally keep the angles of my arms and the relation of the mallet to the forearm pretty much the same, and just turn it up on the vertical surface. Get that going. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. So look at the purple line. Remember, that red line is where the mallet goes in the hand. The purple line, I want you to kind of think of that as the angle that the hand is going to move when doing the stroke. I want you to think about this part being sort of a pivot point for the motion, and this end point of the stroke line, we'll call it, is going to go out like so. Pretty much just what would naturally happen if I'm just bending the wrist. But I don't want you to think of like this section of my hand going forward as if I was, very literally knocking on a door. I want you to think of kind of turning out a little bit as we do that same motion. So if you need to, it helps you kind of visualize this. Draw this same line on your hand and think about this point leading, going out, and this point remaining not stationary, but that's going to be the pivot point of the stroke. So just making sure we're set up the right way. Remember, the forearm needs to be parallel with the ground. For some of the top drums, like drum 1 and 2, there may be situations where you want to go a little bit above parallel or a little bit angled upward, but you never want to be angled downward. That's gonna make it so that we can't really have the stroke and angle that we want. In holding the mallet, there again in that red line in the palm, we want this to be at about 135 degree angle. All right, 135 degrees, that should put you in the center of the drum. You don't want to, you know, pick up your harness or your stand and move your grip and arm position around to center. You want to move the drum to you. So in your practicing, whether you're using your school stuff or if you weirdly have your own marching bass drum at home, make sure that you move it to where if you set this up, forearm parallel with the ground and mallet at a 135-degree angle, that should put you in the center of the head. All right, don't move around, don't do any of this weird stuff. For upper drums, you may be angled slightly upward, but like I said, it should be very slight. So one thing we are going to have to adjust for the players is the elbows. We're all different widths and stuff like that. The drums are pretty much a standard width. So if you've got your elbows tucked in here, you're going to run into a situation where you're going to be hitting rims and doing a lot of weird stuff like that. So depending on what drum you're playing and how wide you are, you're going to want to get your elbows out to where the elbow can pretty much be a straight line into having your arm position right about here with a little bit of space, so you're not going to mash your fingers and not be having a good time because of that. So elbows are one thing that we're going to have to adjust for the player. Don't get them tucked. Tucked into the side is not a good place to have them. Also, don't get a chicken wing kind of situation going on. Just nice and relaxed, but out to compensate for the width of the drum and the width of your body. So in order to get our strokes going, there's a couple of different kind of weird things that I want you to go with me a little bit. I want you to try out, and it should make the concepts that we're going for a little bit more accurate. The first thing I want you to do is try to play like you're holding, you know, your kid toy imaginary gun. Pew. You are going to hold the mallet like this with just your back fingers wrapped around and play like that. Let's see what that looks like. So what's happening is this way I'm solidifying the fact that the back fingers do need to be a part of the stroke. What we want to avoid, and why we're doing this, is avoiding a situation where, especially when we're playing double strokes and things like that, we're going to start bailing out the back fingers. All right, the back fingers need to remain in contact with the mallet all the time, but like I mentioned earlier, loose. Not a white knuckle grip of any kind, nice and relaxed, so that there's plenty of breathing room for the mallet. We're going to get good resonance. So, thumb and forefinger out like this. Paying attention to that purple line and the motion of the stroke. Next stroke variation we're going to go through is going to be a little bit awkward, but here we are isolating the 3-finger fulcrum, which you probably, hopefully remember Nick Melenda talking a little bit about last camp, making sure that the thumb is directly across from like pretty much the point between the forefinger and the middle finger, and that's what's going to make up our basic fulcrum right here. A lot of what I saw at camp are things like the thumb getting too far out in front, or the finger kind of getting out and pointing like that. Make sure that they're all right across the mouth from each other. Now the back 2 fingers I'm going to let kind of hang off and do their own thing, so that we're going to isolate this part of the grip.